Wow, dazzling. Yeah, my name is Ian Pearson. I've been doing futurology for about 25 years, since about 1991. I look quite far ahead, and now and again I produce lists of what I think is going to happen. And the last time I did an analysis of that, it turned out that 85% of what I predicted turned out to be correct. I hope that sounds impressive, but the other side of that same coin is that 15% of everything I'm going to tell you today is complete nonsense. I've got no idea which bit is which, unfortunately, so maybe you could advise me later. These are some pictures of my books. I don't recommend that you go and buy them. If any of you would like any copies of these books, just drop me an email, and I will quite happily send you a PDF of the file, save you some money. I don't make any money for my books, I just do it so I've got something to show on my first slide. We hear an awful lot about disruptive technology, and I'm a bit bored about that term. We've been looking at it now for well over a decade. It seems to me we need a new term to look forward to. And every technology which was supposed to be disruptive, yes, it causes some disruption, but usually it causes some new developments as well. And I prefer this new term of stimulative technology. And most of the new technologies we're seeing coming out today will stimulate more new developments and more new industries and more new jobs and more productivity and more wealth and better quality of life than they will eradicate. So sure, they're going to disrupt some stuff, but they're going to stimulate far better than they're disrupting. So technology now is entering a phase where it's a positive thing for mankind. It's no longer just disrupting old industries, it's putting better industries in their place. So when it does make some people redundant, as of course it will, it's creating better jobs for those people to move into. Now, that flies in the face of a lot of the stuff you read all of the time about artificial intelligence and how it's eradicating jobs and so on. Well, I've been working on artificial intelligence since 1983. And I see it as a very positive thing for the human race. In fact, the more advanced the technology gets, the more it forces us to focus on being human. And the advancing technology will humanize us rather than just making people redundant. It's a very positive force for mankind. So don't be frightened of new technology. It's important I say that at the beginning because I'm going to suggest some technologies which will wipe out entire industries, but they will create better industries in their place. So this is a very positive thing to look at. Stimulative technologies will replace disruptive technologies. Let's look at an example of this in practice and go forwards, 30-odd years, 34 years, to 2050. 2050 is a nice round date. I get asked about 2050 all the time. What does cities look like in 2050? What does transport look like? What do people do for jobs? And it seems to me we will have an awful lot of very big changes over the next 30 or 40 years in our cities. One thing which is considerably different from today, if you go to London, you'll find a building called a Shard. It's a very tall pyramid, and it's about 300 meters tall. It's currently the tallest building in the whole of Europe. It is 1% as high as the building we will see in 2050, which is likely to be some sort of a spaceport, which might be well over 30 kilometers tall. Now, 30 kilometers is very, very tall. Any of you who have been to the top of the Shard, it is pretty damn high. Those of us who don't like heights, it is very, very high. But 100 times higher than that is entirely feasible by 2050. In Saudi Arabia, they're currently planning a 1.5 kilometer tall building. Even that is 1/20th as tall as what we can build by 2050. And the technology we're going to use for that is probably the carbon derivatives, things like graphene, carbon nanotubes, carbon foams, things like that. These are incredibly new technologies, but they're also very, very versatile, very, very powerful, very, very strong. So we're going to have spaceports in an awful lot of cities, and the reason you want those to be very tall is because fuel costs an awful lot, and most of the fuel in a rocket is used up in getting it the first few hundred meters off the ground. If you can start it 30 kilometers up, it will cost a fraction of the price to get it into space. So we will have some spaceports which probably will be 30 kilometers tall, or even more by 2050. By the end of the century, those spaceports could be hundreds of kilometers tall. And in fact, the physical limits, the limits imposed by physics based on the strength of the material, in theory, you can make a building 600 kilometers tall before you start running out of strength in the core materials. 600 kilometers is about 150 kilometers above the Hubble Space Telescope. The top of that, if you've got a penthouse flat on the top of that building, you'd be living in deep space. That's how tall you could actually build a building in theory. We probably won't go that high. You can also make structures on buildings which will float because they're lighter than air, and I'll get onto that in a little while. So there are quite a lot of major changes that we're going to see in buildings by 2050. Any of you that have watched the film Blade Runner will be familiar with the very tall pyramidal buildings which are city-sized. You can get tens of thousands of people living in those single buildings. Many of them will never leave that building, except maybe once or twice a year. You just don't need to. You could have hundreds of thousands of people living in a single building, which is thousands of floors tall. So cities will be very different from cities today. Demographics is also changing. It's impossible to live in Europe and not notice a major migrant influx. A lot of refugees moving in, a lot of migrants moving in from North Africa. But we're also seeing a reverse problem of a lot of the very talented people who did move in from places like India. In the previous generation, their parents came into Europe to get a better life for their kids. A lot of those people are now going back to India to get a better life for their kids. So we're seeing a new social phenomenon called remigration. We're starting to lose some of our top engineers and top brain surgeons and so on who are going back to where their ancestors came from to get a better life for their kids because their original homelands are now doing very well indeed. So we got lots of migration problems going round and round in circles with brain drains and remigration and immigration and aging populations. This is going to dramatically change the structure of our societies over the next coming decades. But it's important to realize that a lot of the people living in our future society won't be actual people. We're moving into an age of genetic modification where we can genetically modify our pets so that we can give them extra abilities. You'll be able to talk to your pet cat or pet dog by 2050, and it'll be able to talk back because it'll have a brain extension which is linked into the cloud with lots of artificial intelligence, which essentially increase the IQ of your pet cat from 10 to a couple of hundred. Your pet cat could be smarter than you are using some of the latest AI available on the cloud. In fact, your chief executive could be a pet cat by 2050. I suspect for a lot of companies that might actually be improvement already. But we will have transhumanism, we'll have androids, we'll have robots, we'll have pet cats, we'll have pet dogs, pet hamsters. A lot of cyberspace life with artificial intelligence creations will also be part of that. And we've all watched the science fiction films like Terminator and iRobot and AI and so on, where we know that future AIs will be as clever or cleverer than real people. And all of these will be part of our societies by 2050. So your future society, the future infrastructure, the future transport technology has to be able to cope with all of those, as well as just shuttling people around. So, how do you shuttle androids around? How do you shuttle pet cats with an IQ of 250 around? How do they want to travel? These are issues we're going to have to face. androids will very much be soon part of society. I've done several projects over the last few years on Android sex. Everybody's interested in that. You know, everybody knows you're going to be buying androids. Eventually, they'll be about the same cost as a reasonably high-end family car. So, you know, 20, 25,000, 30,000 euros is about the same price as we would expect to pay for a reasonable android to look after your home. And that android will do all sorts of fetch and carry jobs. It'll go off and do your shopping and clean the house, act as your home butler. But it'll also probably be one of your best friends. Because let's face it, if you're going to spend 30 or 40,000 euros on an android, you're going to buy one which looks cute. You're not going to buy an ugly one. And if you're going to buy one which is attractive, you're going to form an emotional relationship with it. You might well take it to bed when your partner's away on a business trip. So, you know, these are things which people need to worry about. And androids will very much be part of society, and they'll be sharing the transport. They may be a driver on the transport, but they will need to get around. And these are just some pictures of some current androids which are already in existence. These are absolutely rubbish compared to the ones we would expect to see in 5, 10, 15, 20 years' time. And by 2050, your android will be twice as smart as you are, and will probably be a lot cuter than you are, and will get all of your dates before you do. So, you know, androids will be competition, as well as just things to worry about on transport. Going back to transport, you know, I'm talking about various technologies during this talk, but I'm going to try and link it back to transport infrastructure. Already, there's a race to get the best self-driving cars on the road. So we've had Google, we've had Tesla, now we've got Singapore already deploying the first self-driving taxi service. This was 2 or 3 weeks ago. So already you can get a self-driving taxi if you're in Singapore. So it's not the future anymore, this is now the past. And other companies like Uber are already buying up self-driving cars to act as a replacement for their cars with drivers in. And obviously their long-term game is to get rid of all of the drivers so they don't have to pay them. And they've got big contracts with companies like Tesla to buy lots of self-driving cars that they can just employ themselves and keep all of the profits. Mercedes and various other trucking companies are working on self-driving trucks. There's various stages of that where you link trucks together and then they become fully self-driving. We can expect an awful lot of self-driving freight transport on the roads by 2025. That's when Mercedes expect to have these in commercial use. Other companies, they might even beat Mercedes, but there'll be certainly lots of others that will follow them very, very quickly indeed. So by 2030, we will have a lot of self-driving trucks and self-driving vans on the road, which are doing delivery jobs. And this will be very transformative for the whole of the local freight delivery. All of this begs for Internet of Things to be built into these devices. We need to have some ability to monitor where they are, what they're doing, what their engines are like, how much fuel they got on board. And we will have companies which are developing the Internet of Things architecture to go into those. But the current Internet of Things mechanisms are very, very insecure. At the moment, 70% of the new cars being sold are capable of being hacked. They can hack into your engine management system, take control of your steering and your brakes and your accelerator when you're driving at 110 kilometers per hour down a motorway. That's pretty dangerous. So we have some progress that we need to make in technology to make this safe. But vehicle Internet of Things is certainly going to be a part of future life. And it will get solved. We will solve the engineering problems, and they will talk to each other. They'll talk to the cloud. They'll talk to lots of other things. And we will have very sophisticated Internet of Things built into these future cars. In fact, it's in danger of revolutionizing the whole idea of Internet of Things. At the moment, it's very much cloud-based, where it's top-down, and we have some large databases online, and they will connect down and down and down through various layers. It seems to me more likely that it'll be ground up data where you'll have lots of sensors and processors in your devices, and they will work out how to talk to each other, and they will develop ground up data rather than top down data. And instead of having, big data analysis systems, this system will actually develop the data from the ground up and export it onto the net for anybody that wants to use it. So a lot of the paradigms for how we organize the IT will be turned upside down over the next 5 or 10 years. So, read the stuff on what's happening in IoT, but ignore an awful lot of it. Just take it as a temporary way of solving the problems. As an IT guy, I can tell you it's likely to reverse over the next 5 or 10 years, and we will see a ground-up Internet of Things methodology with a lot of the intelligence coming from the basic sensors and the basic processors rather than the big data analysis firms using top-down data analysis. So that'll change quite a lot. The idea of self-driving cars has been around for a long time, and in fact since about 1990, certainly in my knowledge, we were looking at this in telecoms industry way back in 1990, and we were looking at how we could link renewable energy into the IT systems and link that into electric car fleets, and there's a natural synergy there which allows you to get very efficient systems which allow you to organize those fleets and to coordinate the energy between the renewable energy farms like solar farms and wind farms and link that through to the batteries inside the cars. And companies like Tesla, which are currently developing that battery technology, are likely to be at the forefront of that. But they're not a traditional energy company. So we're going to see some novel techniques coming in from outside which will challenge industry techniques head on. So we can expect quite a lot of change as those things ripple through the industry. Again, things like private ownership. Car companies like to make cars, and they like to market those, and they like to sell them to individuals, and individuals like to buy cars. That's not likely to persist for very much longer. The arguments are that the fleet management offers far more advantages in running these systems than individual ownership. So you will probably not own a car even by 2030. The chances are you will rent a car on an hourly basis from some fleet management company which will send the car to your house, pick you up, take you into town, drops you off, and then you totally forget about it. And that'll be owned by a fleet management company. Maybe a derivative of the car rental companies that exist today. Again, we see a transformative effect on the entire car industry, which challenges the whole idea of car ownership. You probably will not need to own a car. So this is where the familiar vision for self-driving cars is at the moment. You start with something like the Google car or the Tesla car or the Samsung car or anybody else's car, and you have a self-driving pod which you can use for transport or delivery. And it may be made of all sorts of materials, glass, composites, probably still have wheels, it'll certainly have a battery, it'll have a big engine on board, and it'll have lots of AI and lots of IT. And Google estimate that this will cost about 30,000 euros for each pod once the costs have come down a bit. So we're talking 30,000 euros per purchase. Do you really want to spend 30,000 euros when you can get one for free, just turning up at your door anytime you want it? It's a very, very cheap taxi service. 30,000 euros is a lot of money to spend for a car when you don't need one. So I suspect that this will stimulate a new market model which will throw away the idea of car ownership. A few people will want to keep a car which they own themselves, but the advantages of doing so will disappear very quickly indeed. So this familiar vision, self-driving pods, transport and delivery, glass, composite materials, doesn't really matter, batteries, fuel cells, it's a very expensive way of doing a very old-fashioned technology, and I really don't think it has very much place in the world in 10 or 15 years' time. I think this is a very short-term vision which really will not survive the test of time. Again, on trends, I live in a little town called Ipswich, and I monitor how fast the trains go past, and about once every 20 minutes a car goes past, and it's a couple of 100 meters long, so the occupancy on that piece of track is about 0.2%. Now, I know from my experience in performance engineering from telecom networks, you can run a network to 80 or 90% occupancy before you start getting any problems. So you could increase the capacity of the railways by a factor of 200 by moving away from the conventional trains and throwing those in the bin, recycling them, and moving towards a self-driving car idea and putting that on the railways themselves. Now, if you do that, you get all sorts of advantages. You get a 200 times increase in capacity, but you also get the ability to assign pods on demand as they arrive. You don't have to wait for a train. You get the very next free pod that comes along, and also that pod can drive on the road just as easily as it can drive on the rail. So you don't need the railway, you just need to get rid of the rails, recycle the steel, and put some tarmac or concrete down in its place, and you can start using exactly the same infrastructure for driving on the roads as you do on the rail. So it seems to me that rail infrastructure is something that belongs in the 20th century. It has no real place in the 21st century, and we should be getting rid of the railways. We should be getting rid of the rail and transforming the railways into sophisticated roads. I know that's not a very popular view in this room, but that's why I'm hiding behind a podium, so you can't throw things at me. But I really do believe that that's the future of rail. It's 200 times better than the 20th century model of using trains. Trains reduce the capacity of the railways immensely by a factor of 200. That's how much worse trains are than self-driving pods. So I suggest we should change. Looking back at the roads, the idea of having a self-driving car like Google are producing, for example, you can get a lot better than that too. You could have a Skilextrix approach. I'm not sure if you've got Skilextrix in Latvia, I presume you probably have. But the idea is you power the car as it goes along. So you don't need Tesla with its big batteries in the back providing lots of power. You only need enough power in the battery to get you across the very local bit of the road. So it's a far easier way of doing it. It's far better if you've got a driverless pod with an inductive pickup, you charge up a supercapacitor, and that gets you across to the next 50 meters. And this is being trialed already for some buses. You could even do the same for bicycles. You can power the bicycles as they go along, not using a motor on the bicycle, but just by literally pulling the bicycle along, using a metal plate on the front of the bicycle and linear induction motor. Now, we know linear induction motors work because we've been using them in Japan for the high-speed railways there for a long time, and even the Hyperloop is going to use magnetic field propulsion too. You can do exactly the same with a bicycle. It costs about €5 to modify any bicycle to be pulled along by a linear induction mat. It's not an expensive technology. So what about pods in this future world? Do we have the €30,000 Google pod with a massive amount of artificial intelligence on board, or do we replace that with a fiberglass pod which costs €300, 100 times cheaper, which you propel around the network using linear induction motors? We know linear induction motors work. We've had them 25, 30 years or more. It's very easy to do that. And then the telecoms network, the reason your phone call costs less than 3 months' wages when you make a phone call is because we now use packet switching rather than circuit switching. The infrastructure for telecoms is entirely transportable to transport technology, and you could get exactly the same benefits from that. So you could make car transport and rail transport tens or hundreds of times cheaper by throwing away the rail and using this new technology. So it's a vastly better way of doing it. You don't need wheels, because with linear induction motors, you can just levitate the pods 2 centimeters above the surface. You pull them along by generating a moving magnetic field. It's all proven technology. So you don't need the battery, you don't need the engine, you don't need the AI, you don't even need the wheels. Instead of 30,000 euros, you're talking about 300 euros for making a fiberglass pods with some magnetic strips on the bottom, and you can just navigate those around using the infrastructure. Now, all of that is entirely feasible. I spent a couple of years of my life designing magnetic fields and shaping them so that you can do this. I know this works. This is where my core expertise is. You can do it. Graphene is a technology which is going to make this feasible, because graphene is an incredibly good conductor. It allows you to produce enormously high magnetic fields with very, very low costs and very, very low energy supply. But with the graphene technology, the big advantage is you don't have anything that's worth stealing. If you use lots of copper wire, there's a big incentive to steal those mats and recycle the copper wire. With graphene, there is very little recycling value, so there's no point in stealing the mats. So the idea is you'd make a mat in a factory, you roll it out overnight on a piece of road, you plug it into the main supply, and the next morning you've got a linear induction mat which is capable of propelling the pods around anywhere they need to go. Very easy way of doing it. You can do high speed. The ability for this system, you can stop the pods at 3G acceleration. That's far faster than your car can stop. So this is safer than any other form of self-driving car or existing car. So it's a safer way of doing it, it's a cheaper way of doing it. Why would you not want to do it? And furthermore, because you can do this anywhere, you can do it on the roads, and then you can do it on the rail as well. If you get rid of the actual rails, you can take these pods straight from your house all the way down to the local railway station, onto the railway line, all the way along to the city you're going to, and the pod arrives off the end of that with a full battery or full supercapacitor to get the last few kilometers through to the final destination. This is a far easier way and better way and cheaper way of doing things than the existing solutions. And you can make the pods with quite sophisticated technology. You can choose the appearance of it if you really would like to own one. Doesn't matter. You can use augmented reality to change what it looks like inside. And you can use shape-changing technology or polymer displays on the outside to change what your pod looks like from the outside. And you can use augmented reality too. Lots of advantages in doing that. You can do it for freight too. There's absolutely nothing to stop you from mixing trucks or vans alongside the cars. You can do pretty much any shape, and you can switch these across the entire system. Very, very versatile way of doing freight. You don't need any rails to do this. All of the rails are replaced with just a rubber mat, and it navigates the magnetic fields, which holds the pods in the right place. And you can take those pods exactly where you want to go. This wipes out an entire industry, but replaces it with a better industry. So it's a productive technology. Compare this with existing visions. I live in the UK. We've got this technology called HS2, which the government asked me about my opinion, and I told them it was absolutely rubbish idea. And they told me back, well, we're going to do it anyway. But it is a rubbish idea. HS2 is an embarrassment for an engineer living in the UK. I really can't believe that our country's thinking of doing this. To me, it's an embarrassment. Looking at something like the Hyperloop, it's a bit better, but it uses a linear induction motor too. And the systems which I've seen proposed for that, it's got a central rail to hold the things in place. You don't need a central rail. You can magnetically shape the magnetic field so that it holds things in place. You just do not need the rails. You can even make these big airships. We've already seen this flying bottom that you've all seen pictures of. You could make that solid. It doesn't need to have helium in it. The new technology using graphene allows you to make graphene foam, which is lighter than air. It's my own invention from a few years ago. I discovered that if you make these spheres small enough, you can actually make the density of that less than helium. So you can make a solid balloon which will float. And when I first came up with the idea, some of the graphene experts said this was just collapse because graphene is too flimsy. But actually the latest results of this are that this graphene foam will withstand a pressure of 20,000 atmospheres rather than just collapse automatically. It's incredibly strong. But you can make foams which are completely solid and incredibly strong, which are lighter than helium. So you can make balloons out of this stuff, probably by about 2030. That presents an entirely new way of doing long distance, fairly slow freight. So solid balloons are a potential way of getting around. You could use the solid balloons for telecoms as well. That's what people are currently proposing. And you could use them for freight as well. You can even self-sterilize all of the surfaces inside that. There are lots of new technologies coming along that allow you to do that too. You can have little microstructures, nanostructures, which vibrate for various reasons, and they will just rupture the bacteria. So you can have these pods which are shared by lots of other people, but they're entirely sterile. As soon as someone gets out, within a few milliseconds, it can be completely sterilized for the next person getting in. It can be sterilized every time there's nobody in there. You just detect whether there's human presence, and you use UV, possibly even with some drones flying around to do that UV, and you can have completely sterile pods. So there's no dangers biologically from sharing these pods with other people. But what about the augmented reality, getting the appearance right for all of this stuff? You can get augmented reality can produce any overlay on your field of view. So you're looking at the inside of your standard pod. You can make it look like your own personal car or your own office or any other way you want to do it. And people outside can also see things using augmented reality. So there's no difficulty with producing an appearance which looks really good. I'm going to finish with a quick look at the implications of artificial intelligence with all of this, because we see a lot of focus on AI right at the moment. AI reduces the value of traditional intellectual skills, just as the steam engine reduced the value of physical skills. What that means is that the value of human skills will increase, emotional skills will increase, interpersonal skills increase, and that transforms the whole nature of work. So it automates an awful lot of everyday tasks and reduces that work, but it frees people to do the people stuff. It needs emotional contact, so you'll have to travel to do these jobs. So it'll increase the commuting. It increases all sorts of things. So the robotics automates the manufacturing, but frees the people up to do the human jobs. I think that's a tremendously good thing for the future of mankind. People don't want to be machines. They want to be recognized as people, and AI will do that. It's a stimulative technology. It allows you to think about upskilling using AI rather than making people redundant by using AI. You've probably read all around this already, so I won't waste any more time on this, but as people become more capable, that produces new opportunities. So this actually creates a reversal of globalization, doesn't it? It's obvious. If you can do a job which is human contact based, you have to be close to that person to do that job really well. That brings a reversal of the globalization that we're currently seeing. So some things will continue to be globalized, but work will start to become less globalized and will become more localized again. I think that's a good thing. Other things like 3D printing, bit of a red herring really, but that allows you to produce things locally. It's a bit overhyped. I'm not very sure how much of an impact it will have, but it allows you to integrate that with robotics and make things locally which you couldn't otherwise do locally. It allows you to, for example, finish off things which are produced partly by a local manufacturer. You can finish those off in your local home and have some exporting to your other local people. It allows you to have entirely new models. Starting to run out of time a little bit, so I'm going to accelerate just for the last 2 or 3 slides. This allows you to do things like part bake at home. So you can finish off things which are, part baked centrally, shipped to your house. Things like a half-baked loaf, for example, or half-baked cake. You can finish it off and then you can ship a very recently baked cake to somebody who lives very locally. This is an entirely new kind of business model which gives people with a local hobby the ability to sell things cheaply to people nearby and revolutionize the local home delivery systems in such a way that it stimulates an entirely new business. Someone who does really elaborate wedding cakes from home can't currently distribute these very cheaply. With these automatic distribution systems, they'll be able to do that much more easily. So it allows them to have an entirely new industry which adds to the current local economy. Finally, you have to really ask, in the 2050 timeframe, where you've got such a transparent link between the machine and your brain, we will be connecting chips straight to your brain by 2050. If you can imagine something and you connect it straight to the network and that goes across the network into somebody else's brain, you can communicate telepathically with somebody else anywhere else in the world. That's 2050 routine technology. But it really does beg the question, by 2050, why on earth would you want to travel? You don't need to travel. You might travel, you might want to travel, but you don't have to travel by 2050. So just exactly how much railway, how many self-driving cars, how many driverless cars do we need? Interesting point to finish. Thank you for listening.
Thank you very much for this vision of future. Please stay for a couple of minutes. Well, taking into account that this kind of information is not easily fitting into the simple human brain as it mine, and the future comes with the idea that, well, everything going to happen, and the main thing I'm going to do, I'm going to speak with my cat, because he's going to be upgraded enough to make a good chat with me. The question is, the information you presented here, it takes us to the point that it's totally different paradigm, totally different value system. Do you see this, are you feeling this coming in evolutionary or revolutionary mode? Because we know the paradigms like that are changing typically in a revolutionary way, and if so, where it's going to start? When going to be the moment when I'm going to watch the television and I'm going to see the very smart cat and I'm going to say, oh, Ian was right, so I'm going to go and take away the local railroad and I'm going to be like a good guy from this perspective?
Yeah, I think one of the clues we get for that is companies like Uber. Uber didn't come in from the car industry. It didn't come in from the taxi industry. Uber came in as a couple of guys come up with a new idea which totally challenged the existing way of doing something using fairly conventional IT. And yet they've taken the taxi industry by storm and caused an enormous amount of annoyance for existing taxi drivers. But they're already thinking that their new drivers are just a temporary thing to go towards the self-driving taxis they expect to have in 5-10 years' time. So that's a complete revolution. And the really key thing there is that they didn't care about whether they're wiping out an existing industry. So, when I'm looking at this self-driving car model that Google and Samsung and everybody else are trying to push, I'm thinking, well, if I was a fiberglass manufacturer, and I'm really good at making fiberglass canoes or something, it'd be quite easy for me to make, cubical fiberglass pods. It doesn't bother me if I'm wiping out a car industry, but I would be in pole position to make those fiberglass pods that would be the basis of the future transport infrastructure, both on road and on rail. So I don't care about the existence of the car companies or the train companies who are making existing trains. You know, they are an obsolete industry which I can just wipe out to make a few megabucks for myself. And I think that's how it's going to happen. It's a stimulative technology because it creates more new industries than it's wiping out. But we won't see that coming as an incremental technology from the car industry. None of the big car industries are going to make pods which cost 1% of the cost of their existing models. They can't make money doing that. They will not kill themselves. So it needs somebody from outside to do that. So it's revolutionary. But I still go back to my first slide that it's a stimulative technology because by doing that and reducing the costs of local transport so much, it liberates lots of other business models which otherwise are not feasible. So it transforms the whole of society and creates far more winners than it does losers, but it's capable of wiping out at least 2 entire industries of train manufacturer and car manufacturer.
Thank you. Then I had one more question, how to avoid that my cat is making collision with my Android wife in 2050. But still, we're going to do that, I believe, afterwards, not now with this question. Thank you very much. One more time, applause to Ian. And I'm asking here on the stage also William to get the souvenirs, because you were the first 2 visionaries here who shared the future, and we have handmade souvenirs for you. One more time, gentlemen, applause to you. Thank you very much. We have a human kind of service here. She is not Android, she is a real human. Please, souvenir. Thank you very much.